Good evening. We've got an exciting guest speaker this evening, someone who's set some world records in being an entrepreneur and some of the things he's done. My name's Ron Lesniak. I'm a lecturer in the CET 191 Entrepreneurism class, and I was asked to say a few words at the beginning of this talk by Gurbaksh Chahal. He and his family came to the United States from India when he was 4 years old. At $25 to their name, and by the age 18, he had sold his first company, Click Agents, an internet advertising company he created as a teenager. I believe he started when he was 16, for $40 million. Since then, he has acted as the youngest executive of a multi-billion-dollar NASDAQ corporation, and started and sold his second company, Blue Lithium, to Yahoo for a mere $300 million. So this is a man who is an unbelievable entrepreneur, a believer in passion with action, and a mover and a shaker. Unparalleled in young entrepreneurship, he has been on the cusp of every internet advertising trend for the past 10 years. This is a man who pioneered the internet and in the advertising world. He starred in Fox's Secret Millennium. He has appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show. He's been interviewed by Bonnie Hunt, Neil Cavuto, and profiled in the New York Times, Entrepreneur Magazine, and the San Francisco Chronicle. He is currently developing several other television shows and recently launched his third company, G-Wallet, and he lives in San Francisco. I'd like you to introduce to Gurbaksh Chahal. Let's give him a nice, warm welcome.
Thank you for the intro. Let me just put this in presentation mode. All right. So how many of you guys want to be entrepreneurs? All right. Good, good. So I guess most of this will apply to kind of universally everything. And I guess just to give you some background on kind of what I'm going to talk about today, it is going to be very different than what you're probably used to hearing in a classroom. Most of everything I talk about, whether it's in my book or even today, it really comes from the heart, and it comes from experience, and it comes from a very unorthodox way of doing things. And it also comes from reality. So the thing that I've realized is that in the world of business, too many times we get absorbed, especially in the classroom or on textbook, and we sometimes forget that businesses are started with relationships and the desire to go ahead and succeed, and it comes from passion. And a lot of the things I'm going to talk to you about is exactly those few things. So before I go though, most of the time when people hear my story, I got to put up a disclaimer: stay in school. So I did drop out of high school when I was 16 to start my first company, but that does not tell anybody that that's the way to go. Because in essence, I think the perfect thing that school teaches us is it teaches us how to learn. And all of us have a very different way of learning. And you can say that I kind of learned very differently at 16 through reality of the way to start a business and throw myself in the business world. But that doesn't mean that you guys should do that the same. I think that the platform you guys have is probably a gift that I didn't have in terms of this education as well as this opportunity. So stay in school. A couple other things. Entrepreneurship in general is like a roller coaster. It has its ups and downs, but it's your choice to scream or enjoy the ride. So another way of looking at that is that it takes a lot of gut and it takes a lot of emotion to succeed in the business world. And you're going to have so many crazy days, and you're going to have probably one or two really good days. And then you have to basically realize that, okay, through the bad days that you have, it's okay. Because you know what? You're going to go ahead and learn, and you're going to adapt, and you're going to stomach yourself into surviving the next day. And sometimes that's the worst thing, because that is most of the time when people give up. And that's what you're not supposed to do, because if you're passionate about something, you believe in something, you want to do it, you have every opportunity to have more of those good days to take you on the next ride. So one of the things I also want to share before we start is I want to read to you the RadiumOne Mantra. Actually, my third company is called RadiumOne. It was formerly called G-Wallet, but This is actually something that we have hanging in our lobby. And this is what I aspire everybody to actually think this way, because I don't think that I hire employees. Even though we have 200 employees across different offices, I do not think of them as employees. I think of them as entrepreneurs. So I'm going to just read this to you, and I hope you guys get what I think people can get out of this. We believe anything is possible. We see opportunity when others see impossibility. We take risks. We're focused. We hustle. We know that nothing is unrealistic. We feel overwhelming love. We embrace our childlike wonder and curiosity. We take flying leaps into the unknown. We contribute to something bigger than ourselves. We create, we learn, we grow, we do. We believe it's never too late to start living a dream. We are entrepreneurs. So a couple other things, I guess, to start off, just because it's very unconventional, and I want to go ahead and let you know what you're not going to learn first. So the next big $1 billion idea, right? I get asked many times, I just need an idea, just hook me up, just give me one great idea, focus me on it, and I'm going to become that next Mark Zuckerberg, right? And what most people don't realize is that Mark Zuckerberg didn't create social networking, right? It was already there. He made it better. He made it in a way that actually could grow into a $50 billion company today. And that's what you have to remember, is that the next best thing is actually something that's already there, but a better iteration of it. The quickest way to sell a company for lots of money. So a lot of times people are in it for the wrong reasons. If you look at my resume, you can quickly say that, okay, well, you obviously know how to start a company and flip it. It's not so easy, right? I think that's not the way the business world works, is because you cannot create just a business for the sole purpose to sell it. That's just not the way it is. I mean, sometimes it works, but that's called hitting the lottery. But that's not what we want to do. We actually want to work for it, and the lottery is not something that we can predict. What we can predict is when we can create value, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. How to get investors for your next big idea, right? Most of the times people think that I have an amazing idea and all I need is money for it. And that is another thing that just doesn't work, because if you think of all the greatest companies of the last 10 years, they actually already started a business and grew traction, and then they got investors, right? A mere idea does not get you money. It's the aspiration to actually have traction that shows investors, as well as yourself, that you're actually onto something. To be successful, all you need is to think of something different. Again, going back to my first point, you should not, I'm a big proponent of something that most VCs probably will disagree with. Most VCs always say, what's so different about you? What's actually going to go ahead and make me want to invest in you? And what are you doing different than someone else, right? And when you think about things that way, what ends up happening is you try to create something that is unproven. And when the odds are against you, when things are unproven, what are you really going to do? You're probably not going to go ahead and be successful in that regard. So it's very, very key to go ahead and figure out one thing that's already out there that's proven. So if you kind of look at my model in my career in advertising, advertising is a $35 billion industry. It's been around. People make money through ads. All of the stuff that we've done is to make advertising more intelligent, right? And it's already been proven. There's different variations of it as the internet moved on, but it's something that was already established and out there. How you will change the world with your business. This is another common dilemma that ends up happening. I think entrepreneurs take far too much credit when successes hit the epitome of it and say that, okay, they started this business to change the world. That's not the way it works, right? I can tell you right now that some of the biggest companies that have changed the world because they grew into what they became. They did not change the world because that's called philanthropy. And philanthropy in the business world doesn't go hand in hand. It only happens after the fact. So if you have an idea that wants to change the world, think about it as a later stage in the process, not the beginning aspect of it. How to write a business plan. This is something I'm also very, very negative on, because we've entered the economies of scale where things move so quickly, and the business world has changed so much where innovation is going so fast. So if you're going to spend months and months on to write a business plan, which is all about theory, you're actually wasting time. So I know that this is probably not the textbook way of it, because most textbooks teach you what a business plan is to give you practice on how to actually formulate things. But the idea of it is that the number one thing that's going to keep you away from being successful is time. And that is something that we do not have in our favor in this business world, especially as it becomes more competitive. So move away from the business plan and focus on traction. And how you will live a stress-free life as an entrepreneur. That is one thing that life just doesn't give you, especially if you choose the path of being an entrepreneur. So here's the 3 things that I hope you do learn today. The definition of ambition, discipline, and purpose as it is defined by you as an individual. That is probably the most important thing, because if you can figure those 3 things out, you will become a very successful entrepreneur. Fear is your worst enemy. Risk is your best friend. That's what you have to basically realize, is that the only thing that's going to stop you is the fear of failure. The only thing that's actually going to help you is when you actually decide to take that risk. They go hand in hand. And the last thing, so if I'm a little tired, it's because of number 3. Insomnia will become your best friend. So keep that in mind. So let's talk about this as well. I shared this slide with during my last sales summit at RadiumOne, and I sent this to my sales force. I said that the hierarchy of success, whether you're a salesperson, whether you're a product person, whether you're an engineer, whatever you are in the company, is probably defined by these 3 very basic principles. So if you have these 3, you will become successful. The first one is obviously ambition, and this is just the mere desire of wanting to win, right? If you have it, you will go ahead and make that your fuel. The second thing is discipline. Too many people sometimes want to be successful, but don't want to put in the work, right? So that's a stage 2. If you have that ambition, the second phase obviously is discipline, because you got to realize there's sleepless nights, there's things that you have to do that you never dreamed of, but you're going to have to do them in order to go ahead and put in that sweat equity in place. And the third thing is making a difference and making a dent. And that comes down to purpose. What drives you? What motivates you? What actually wants to make you want to put the pieces together? Because if those pieces are together in the way that you envision it, and you have the right basis of creating that, you're going to be successful. Otherwise, if you're in it for the wrong reasons of saying, okay, I want to be the next billionaire, I want to be on Forbes magazine, I want to do this, those are all the wrong things. All of those happen by the byproduct of success. None of them happen in the beginning. And I know that some of this may be too apparent to you, but I'm just trying to go ahead and make it very clear, because sometimes people are in it for the wrong reasons, and you want to make sure whatever you're delivering, whatever you're making, whatever you're creating has the right foundation, morally, ethically, motivationally, because all of that composes your best outcome to actually wanting to win. So, and here's a quick diagram of what an entrepreneur's brain looks like. So, obviously work ethic from the beginning. You probably trust not that many people. But in the middle, you have this imagination. You actually have the ability to create your own reality. And you have very little patience, right? Because that's one thing that time doesn't give you. But you're creative, you have the charisma, you have the backward selling acumen, and you have the self-esteem to inspire and lead people. So these are all the different characteristics you need in order to connect these dots. So a couple of other things to just think about from business that you can learn from, like what's happened in the last 10 years, right? And one of my favorite quotes in business actually doesn't come from a business book, it actually comes from science, right? Darwin, it is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent that survive, it is the ones that are most adaptable to change, right? If you kind of just look at the last 15 years of the internet, how much has it evolved? And probably the last man standing that's still the 800-pound gorilla is Google. But just think about the era. We had Netscape, we had Alta Vista, we had Yahoo, then we had Google. I'm sure we had a lot of stuff in between. But that's the evolution of it, and this is in the span of 15 years, right? Even look at social networking, right? I mean, look at how much has changed from Friendster to MySpace to Facebook to whatever else is out there. So that is the difference, right? I mean, you have to adapt to change. So here's 4 examples of companies that we can all kind of look back at in the last 15 years and say that where the eye was off the ball. First one. since it's all about innovate or die, here's 4 examples of where you don't want to die. Kodak. This used to be a very famous thing, right? This is a Kodak moment, right? You take a family picture, blah, blah, blah. But at its peak, it had 160,000 employees, right? 160,000, that's a lot. And in 1997, it had a market capitalization of $28 billion. So obviously at that was the peak of it. It filed for bankruptcy. It's no longer out there, right? Simply because they didn't innovate part of the digital revolution. And here's something that has become like a vocabulary of our, that defines a verb for us, right? Is no longer even in business because of the sole fact of it didn't adapt to its reality and change. Blockbuster, 30,000 employees in its peak, $5 billion market cap less than 10 years ago, right? We actually used to drive to watch movies and bring them home. They obviously didn't innovate fast enough, part of the digital revolution, and now Dish acquired its assets for very little money. But that's just another example. BlackBerry, anybody have BlackBerries in the audience? Shame on you. So, you won't be soon enough. But in 2008, June 2008, BlackBerry had a market capitalization of $83 billion. Like, it owned the smartphone market, right? It was like you were the cool kid if you had a BlackBerry. If you raise your hand, you're not so cool right now. But the drift of it is that they thought they owned it, right? They thought that simply by having a keyboard attached to a so-and-so screen, that was enough for them. Apple came along, boom. In less than 4 years since this peak, Apple went from, I guess, a $50 to $100 billion company to all the way a $600 billion company, right? Like a multiple of that $83 billion because they created something that didn't exist and they made it better and they evolved and they pushed the market that way, right? And that's something that happened in a matter of 4 years, right? That's phenomenal. And that is the speed of the business world today. One thing that I've even seen in the last 14 years of my life is that innovation is kind of like, it grew, and I think the internet allowed it to go ahead and make a lot of fast decisions, and companies grew fly by night, and now it's actually become so intense, even for the big boys to keep up, because there's startups, there's people that can be nimble enough and go after a problem and just own it in a matter of short months or years. MySpace. Who had a MySpace account back in the day? Oh yeah, well I heard they're relaunching, but you might want to save that. When they got acquired for $580 million in July 2005, we all thought that was crazy. And then just a couple years later, Yahoo attempted to buy it in a merger for $12 billion. Thank God that didn't happen, right? But this kind of tells you right there is that while people thought $580 million for the largest social networking site in 2005 was a joke, it could have maintained it, right? Look at what Facebook is today, a $50 billion company, right? So this is just another great example. And the last example is probably the greatest loss in shareholder value in history. AOL. They had this clever idea in December '99. They were going to go ahead and create old media and new media together. Comes out $222 billion in market cap. That was in December '99, and what ended up happening? They ended up erasing $220 billion in a span of 13 years since it didn't work. So what's the rule of thumb here? You better innovate. So you've already done the intro on me, so I will just skip ahead to go on to the slides. So one of the biggest things to learn here is the idea versus the myth, right? The idea versus action. Ideas are 1% of the journey, right? They actually just tell you what to do. The action is actually what composes of the result of it. And most people, again, absorb themselves on, I have the next biggest, coolest, greatest, amazing idea. And that's where they absorb 99% of their energy, where what they really should be doing is saying, okay, that's what I think I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and actually plan out the roadmap to create something out of it, but then I'm going to be open, and I'm going to see where it takes me. Google is a great example. Facebook is a great example of multi-billion-dollar companies, again, that started off as something that existed before. Even my companies, I started Click Agents. We were not the first performance-based advertising network. At Blue Lithium, we were not the first behavioral advertising network. And even G-Wallet, when I originally launched G-Wallet, I had the wrong idea. And you would think that a third-time entrepreneur with my success, blah, 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 would actually know what I'm doing, right? And this is a clear example of me basically realizing that I didn't know what I was doing, but I was quick to react to it. I was quick enough to realize that this is the wrong area of focus I want to do, and we pivoted the entire company to RadiumOne, which is based on social advertising, and today, it's bigger than even my prior 2 companies. But that's the kind of DNA that you have to have and realize that you can launch a product, get it to parity, innovate, and then start separating from the pack. So the second lesson here is that you want to be open to change. Take the blinders off, look around, don't be afraid to go in all sorts of unusual directions, because that's where you might find the most unusual and surprising opportunities. So a lot of people force stuff to work. They get obsessed. They think that it's passion that drives them, but it's actually obsession. There's 2 different things. You can't get obsessed with a product. You can't get obsessed with an idea. Because if you get obsessed, you're going to force something to succeed, versus if you actually just say, okay, this is one direction, but I'm going to keep myself entirely open to realizing where else I can go. That's where the best result ends up happening. Valuation is built by scarcity. Valuation is based on what you're valued today. And it is completely built around scarcity. It's not built around necessarily how much profit you make or how much revenue you make. That's a component. But the real valuation of what drives you in the marketplace is the scarcity value you have. The biggest deals are when companies are not sold, but when they're bought, right? Companies that are sold are normally being taken over. Companies that are being bought are actually bought because of emotion. And if you can actually ever sell your company by emotion, it's based on a scarcity value that you built up based on someone that actually needs something from you versus buying something, right? There's a very big delineation. And every entrepreneur should strive to build scarcity value from day one. Hire only rock stars. This is actually a quote from my book that I think actually summarizes a great way to look at leadership and teamwork. Hire the smartest people you can find. Smart people make beautiful music together. Lots of smart people working in unison can have the power and beauty of a Beethoven symphony. You want to pick quality over quantity. Too many times people want to just hire people to do jobs. And I don't look at it that way. I kind of look at every single person that I actually ends up being part of my team. They look at this as a career. They don't look at this as a job. You stamp out at 5 o'clock, you're not part of the team, right? Doesn't mean that you have to devote 24 hours of your day to actually go ahead and work for a company, but you got to have that passion where you're not looking at it as an in and out time clock. It's when passion is driving you to make decisions and make results because you're part of this greater team and you're part of that connection that drives you to be successful. The other thing I learned is, and again, I had to learn this very, very differently because I started at 16, is not to be frugal. Like, can you imagine being a 16-year-old CEO and saying, oh my God, I'm gonna have to pay someone that much, right? I've never even thought about that before. And that's the kind of way I would think about it. I would actually say, that person's gonna make more money than me? That's not fair. I mean, that's the kind of stuff, obviously, you think about when you're adolescent. Now, I don't look at it that way. If somebody's worth $500,000, I will pay them $500,000 because that means that there's greater value attributed there. So all in all, the net of that is that you don't want to be frugal. You want to pay people. You want to give them the equity or give them the cash component, whatever they deserve, because that's the end result. You get what you pay for. You get what you actually connect with. And you want to be able to have the right people with you. Never keep yourself vulnerable. Never make someone have control of you that lets you not control your own destiny. So when I was 16, I had a business partner that I met on the internet, surprise, that actually was part of the person that created the technology, the beginning ad serving technology for click agents. And even though I'm Indian, I'm not technical, so I had to have someone create this for me. And what I realized is that I just, outsourced this to someone and forgot about technology, did my deals, cold calls, and within 6 months had a business that was doing $300,000 a month. And I felt great. And then I realized that this person basically told me that if I did not give them a third of the company, they would basically shut me down. And again, like, I'm 16. I ended up saying, try it, go for it, let's see what happens. And I was shut down. And what I ended up learning there is that I actually could have lost everything. I would not be here today if I did not make the right decisions from that point on. And the decisions I had to make is basically realize that I can never let someone have full control and visibility of everything. If I don't know how to program, that's okay. I just need to surround myself around people that actually do and that are in it for the right reasons and incentivize them that way. And what ended up happening, I found some people. I found better people, people that I could trust. I got back up and running. And 12 months from that point, ended up selling my company for $40 million. So even what I thought could have been the biggest disaster, had I not made the right decisions, that could have just completely killed my career right there. But the most important lesson I learned there is vulnerability. And you never want to be vulnerable in that environment. Asking for help. Don't expect help from others unless you're willing to do something or give something in return. So I used to think that because I was Indian, I would always look up to other Indian entrepreneurs and say, oh, well, you know, I'm Indian, they're Indian, they can help me out. It doesn't work that way. And what I realized is that you have to change that dynamic. I mean, this is probably something that is as cold-hearted as it may sound. But the reality of it is if you want something, you know, they're not going to give it to you, right? You're only going to get something out of it if you present something that is of actually value to them, right? And that basic point I had to learn myself so I can change the conversation around. So the conversation was no longer about how you're going to help me, it was about how I was going to help them, but they were going to actually get me to do something for them. Or they were actually going to do something for me. They were actually going to add value. You have to change that dynamic, otherwise you're never going to get people to actually do something for you. It's basic human nature, but applied in the business world, a whole lot of sense. No one helped me at Click Agents. People only offer to help me at Blue Lithium because of my track record at Click Agents. So there is that growing pain you have to do the first time around, right? As an entrepreneur, that is going to be the toughest thing that you have to go through. You have to almost own your stripes. And you own your stripes by going through the painful process of doing a lot of these things on your own until you prove yourself that you can add value for others. Need versus necessity. Understand the difference between need versus necessity. The dot-com world was a prime example of something in that nature. The subprime mortgage fallout was another one. And what you got to realize is greed isn't good, and you have to spend every dollar like your last, right? And that's a basic form lesson that we sometimes forget in every different business cycle here on. And the net of that is that people are only going to be impressed by one thing, and that's your performance, nothing else. Sometimes people think they have to put on an image or put on a show or put on this thing that will drive them to succeed with a client or an investor or some degree, but all of that stuff is irrelevant. What's really going to drive them is on real merit and real performance. Exterior stereotypes. What matters most is how you see yourself. The number one characteristic in entrepreneurship, what I realized, is confidence. And that is the difference between landing a customer, landing an employee, and actually growing your business and creating that aura that actually creates that dynamic around it. And I didn't have that early on in my life. If you would have asked me at 16 to stand up here in front of class, I'd be running out the door. And I was the biggest introvert on the planet. But it takes time, it takes practice, you can overcome it, but this is one of the biggest things that actually drives you to create that culture and create that company. So confidence is key. And the business world is a stereotype. You can't let it get to you. When I was 16, I had two options. When people asked me what I did before Click Agents, I could tell them the truth, which was like middle school, or I could be so empowering and engaged with what they were enthused about the business that they could care less, right? The fact that the question of me being 16 wouldn't even be part of the problem. It would be the fact that, wow, you're actually doing $1 million a month, and you're doing it this way, and you're profitable, and you're this, you're that, because the entire conversation is built around that. It's not based upon what I did in the past, or if I have an Ivy League education, or this and that. It's all about actual, real numbers. Relationships. A real successful business is not run by algorithms. It's by relationships. And relationships are one of the key things that drive you through one phase of your life or the next. And you never want to burn a bridge. I mean, I've been insulted, told I was going to be failed. One VC actually told me a year into Blue Lithium, told me I was going to miserably fail, that I should save my years of my youth, and I should go into a completely different direction, right? And I bit my tongue, and I did not retaliate. I said, thank you very much for your advice, and life goes on, right? That's part of that thick skin you have to have, but also the realization that you never want to burn a bridge. You never want to react in a way because you don't know when that person you're going to meet back in your life, and where you're actually going to go ahead and have a better dialogue with them, and where it's actually going to make you do something that could be powerful because you proved them wrong. The hunger. Too many people in this world want a handout. Surround yourself around people that want to see you successful and are hungry. And if you learn this early on, success will repeat itself. I'll give you 2 examples of that. When the second time around at Blue Lithium, I needed another ad serving technology, engineering team, so forth. And I found a company in Belarus, of all places. And I flew down in Belarus, met these guys. They had their apartments were rundown apartments, but that was their office too. And they had some great technology, very hungry, very scrappy people, very motivating. And when it was time to strike a deal, I asked the guy, what do you want for this? Because I need this technology. Can you help me put it together and be part of this greater company? And he said, if you give me $500,000, we'll work like slaves, you'll have the technology, and it'll be all yours. And I actually said, hey, I'll give you a better deal. I'll actually let you be part of this company. I'll give you equity in it. And 3 years later, that became $15 million for them. So, and the desire is that that's not wrong. I didn't do anything wrong there. I actually did right, because that extra $14.5 million they deserve, right? And that's the kind of motivation you want to do, is because you have to spread the pie, because that's the only way the pie actually gets bigger. Another example of hunger, and hunger repeating itself. Another founding employee of mine was actually trying to be a doctor. And I guess I'm a bad influence. He dropped out. And I actually hired him as one of my founding employees for Blue Lithium. He worked his butt off. He played an instrumental role at Blue Lithium. And then after we sold the company, he actually started another one. And after 2 years, he sold it for $50 million. So that just kind of tells you hunger and the importance of hunger and the importance of actually surrounding yourself around people that will go all out when you need to actually connect the dots. Culture is everything. The first 20 employees will make or break you. Hire the right DNA, and that company culture will actually go so much farther for you. And this is key, because culture is one of those things that, you're around these people every day. And you want to make sure you're around people that actually want to be there. And if they want to be there, they're going to hire the next 20 people that actually want to be there too. And that's what creates this aura. If you look at Steve Jobs' book, right? It was all about thinking differently, surrounding yourself around A-list people, surrounding yourself around people that actually want to be there. And that's the art of culture. And the culture is what drives you. Culture is what makes the difference between having a small company and a super large one, because that culture is what actually amplifies the success of everybody. Rejection. Who likes rejection in this room? Liar. Liar. So nobody likes rejection. It's human nature, right? But the art of the business world is you have to embrace rejection to the point you have to almost fall in love with it. And it is the hardest thing, especially as a 16-year-old growing up and so forth. I was challenged in that arena growing up, but I learned to accept it. I actually let it fuel me. I made that negative energy actually into positive energy. And that's what you have to do, because everything happens for a reason. And if it happens, you have to learn to accept and embrace it. Because if that happens, that doesn't mean it's over. That just means you have to try again. Anytime somebody actually tells me they don't want to work for me, I just end up saying, not right now, I'll get you sometime. Or if a client says no, we've eventually got them on board. Not just because we stalked them, but because we actually persisted on developing a relationship that actually allowed them to realize that it's in it better for them. And another couple of examples are, nobody wanted to invest in me even the second time around. I had 3 term sheets from VCs that actually ended up saying, nope, not interested. And then I found one that was even a better deal. And I eventually got the right investors that believed in me. 2 other industry examples are J.K. Rowling, probably one of the most successful authors in history, also a billionaire. She got rejected 6 times. 6 times from saying, no Harry Potter, not interested, right? Magellan's another example. The GPS company, they had this crazy idea that people would actually want GPSs in their cars. 87 times they were told no. That's a lot of rejection, right? It's a lot of passion because people actually ended up using GPSs in their car. And these guys are one of the first people that went to market for it. Negotiation and perception. Always negotiate from a position of strength. If you need something from the other guy you've already lost, people want what they can't have. Become the thing people want. And perception is reality. What they see is more important than what is. So show them what they want to see and tell them what they want to hear. You have to believe in yourself almost to the point of madness. You have to be able to sell the dream, build a dream. You have to be able to connect the dots in your heart, in your mind, with your team all over. And when you do that, things work out, even if you do them too early. Another example is Google. When Google was just a mere employee, 20 employees, they landed a Netscape account. And Netscape back then was this big company, right? And their servers crashed. So imagine that. You just signed the biggest deal of your life. You're not prepared for it. And the servers crash, right? So that's the pivotal point. Just like I had my pivotal point when I was 16, where I had to figure out what to do when I was vulnerable. They figured out what to do in those coming days. And what ended up happening, a company 10 years later became $250 billion in market cap, right? Those are some of the decisions that you end up making that throw yourself in a situation and that allow you to go ahead and create even a bigger aspiration out of it. Thick skin. Grow a thick skin, a very, very thick skin. People will question your ability to succeed. And the loudest among them might make you doubt your own talents. So you'll need a thick skin to drown out the noise. The silence will help you focus on your objective and you will prevail. In my second company at Blue Lithium, in one of my board meetings, 3 years into it, one of my board members actually said, hey, you know what? I think the company's growing a lot faster than you are. So imagine that. You're the founder. Supposedly you're doing things right. Revenues, profitability, the whole 9 yards. Everything's working in the right direction. But one of your board members just doesn't believe in you. So I had 2 options. I could react. I could start crying. Don't do that. I could go ahead and react negatively, right? And then I'd just basically be instituting a fight, which doesn't make sense. Or I could basically accept the fact that that's how this one person feels and let that be the case, but only prove them wrong through performance. So if I had the thick skin to help me keep on the objective and continue winning, and that's what you have to do. So final thoughts. Take the advice of the late great comedian Jimmy Durante. Be nice to the people on the way up because you will probably meet them on the way down. And which means you got to do the work, keep your eye on the tiger, fight like hell, defy the odds. It's worth it. But remember, you never want to compromise your morals. Steve Jobs said it best. Stay hungry, stay foolish. And to me, what that means is never forget where you came from and never forget where you want to go. Thank you.
Open the floor for a few minutes and let you ask some questions. I'm sure you've got some questions.
You might want to use that mic.
Oh, why don't you go ahead?
Okay.
Hi, so first off, thank you so much for being here. I have a pretty specific question. Being a fellow Punjabi from East San Jose, born and raised, I was curious on your perspective on how being in the Bay Area kind of shaped you as an entrepreneur early on, middle school, beginning high school, and whether you see value in staying local to the area these days also, whether for you or for advice you give budding entrepreneurs.
Sure. So I guess I was raised differently, meaning my parents were very religious. I wore a turban for the first 18 years of my life. So I went through a lot of untypical situations at school. And that taught me a lot. And I think that part of the problem is that usually when people feel that, and they get bullied or they get that, they end up becoming this introverted personality. And I ended up realizing differently. I ended up realizing, okay, I'm different, so what? Now let's move on to the next thing. What am I gonna do with my life? And I think that kind of helps. Just, I guess I was lucky with, my grandmother raising me and so forth, in the way of instilling that. But one thing that I did face that I think is to a lesser degree in the Bay Area now is the racism or the stereotypes, right? I think that 10 years ago, there was definite racism and stereotypes. I mean, 10 years ago, it was the idea that if you were the engineer or you were the technical person, you would get fired after you got traction because they'd put in the Ivy League, mature person to manage the business, right? That's all said and done. So I think the opportunities for younger people, minorities, all that stuff has been cleared the road. So I mean, I hope that summarizes or answers your question.
Yeah, on the contrary, the good bar is looking very good.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Can you talk a little bit about the Be Proud Foundation and how you get involved?
Sure. So, I've been very active differently in philanthropy, and having gone through racism and having gone through the issues of being the different kid and full on facing racism, I realized that things probably got better. I mean, as I answer this question right here, in the business world, things have gotten better, at least in Silicon Valley. Now, when the incident that happened a few weeks ago where, basically a supremacist came and killed people in a Gurdwara in Wisconsin, that affected me because I realized that things should not be that way, right? Things should not actually be affected that way. People should understand that we're all different and we should be proud, and we should be able to go ahead and transcend that message. So I created the Be Proud Foundation. We're in the middle of shooting a media campaign that'll go on TV. Originally it was gonna go on earlier, but too much crap on politics for the next few weeks, so we're actually gonna launch it in November. It'll have a social media component to it as well, where you could install the Facebook app, change your profile picture with the Be Proud sticker on it. It'll show a live feed of people joining the movement. It'll have a Twitter integration with it as well. But the whole concept of it is, if you think about the Coney movement a few months ago, it's probably the biggest successful social cause ever on the internet. And it caused this awareness. And that's what inspired us to say, is that if we can inspire people to use social media as a way to recognize that they're different and be proud of it, hopefully that'll take one level away from the problems that we faced a few weeks ago.
One more question, I think. Right. So this is how you made a quick confession over now. So my question is, so I'm looking at different people, how they succeed, how they fail. And some people, they succeed at the first time, like one time first. And some people, they try different failures and maybe finally succeed or not. So what do you think, like, maybe we should even some idea, we should really prepare for that and try to succeed at the first time, or we should have an idea, just go out there and try it and learn from the failure, which approach is like
I think sometimes people learn through failure, but if you don't have to learn it, why do it? So, another way to think about it is I mean, I was driven to want to succeed no matter what. And when you kind of go through those three things I talked about, ambition, discipline, purpose, and you have those three things underlined and your motivation is clear, there's a good chance you're probably not going to fail. So, and this is, again, I'm not trying to get all warm and fuzzy here, but that is, in the essence, the art of business, right? It comes from within. It comes from your heart. And if you can figure yourself out and figure out that what is it going to take for me to react a certain way where I will not accept failure, that ends up happening normally. And failure won't come to you.